Girls of Reddit who have rejected people. What's the worst way someone has taken it? My sister got followed home by a dude she rejected. He went up to the house and started talking to her kids and telling them he was their new dad. Luckily, real dad came out in his police attire. Put a real quick end to that. Edit. Want to clear up some confusion. My sister and the real dad are married, not divorced or anything. The guy followed her home from the hospital she works at, where he was a patient under her care. He made a move on her. She said no. There was no relationship between them besides nurse/patient. Well, maybe not in his eyes. I refer to my brother-in-law as my brother, mostly cause I'm too lazy to type it out, but also cause he's been in my life since I was a little kid. Brother was not threatening the man as a cop, but instead as a father. He just happened to be getting ready to leave for work at the same time. The guy ended up getting transferred to another hospital to be closer to his family after complications from overdosing. This is a slightly different take, but I turned a guy down for a date and he then posted a long snap story about how much he loves his wife that he had neglected to mention all that time. Cheaters will do stuff like that when they feel guilty for trying to cheat. I had actually heard of a lot of people doing this before, but I'd never had it happen to me, and when it did it was completely devastating. He told me I had to go out with him or he would off himself. He then said goodbye, very convincingly and emotionally, and turned his phone off/stopped picking up or answering any texts. I knew him from when we went to high school together, and so I actually had his best mates and his dad's phone numbers. I phoned them and sent the screenshots of the messages to them. Absolutely hysterical and worrying that he was in a gutter somewhere. However, it was very quickly discovered by his livid father that he was actually round a mate smoking weed, and he thought that this would at least get him a pity shag. What a complete and utter twat. When I broke up with my first boyfriend, I was with him for 2.5 years. He went crazy, threatened to off himself, locked himself in the bathroom, etc. I had his mum calling me every night for a week saying he'd swallowed a load of sleeping pills or locked himself in the bathroom with razor blades, etc. She had the cheek to blame it all on me. Thankfully my mum set them both straight, and the only time I saw/heard from him again was about a year later when he came to the pub I went to every weekend with his new girlfriend to try and make me jealous. Then got jealous when I was talking to a friend who looks like a Viking. Quite pathetic really. We went on one date and I declined a second. A couple of days after that he called me and told me what I had been wearing that day. This went on for a couple of months. I'd literally never see him, but at least 3 times a week he'd know exactly what I wore. When I was a nanny, I was walking around with the baby in the pram, and we visited a bookshop. A man in there started talking to me and then asked me out. Very kindly, keeping my father's advice in mind about being kind when I have to reject men when they ask me out. I said that was a nice offer, but my boyfriend might not to be too keen on it. His response to that was to lean in and try and kiss me. I told him to get the duck off me. He then exploded with rage and started screaming in my face. I was saved by the bookstore employee. The man stormed out of the shop. I spent the next few hours shaking like a leaf. What a champion. He was 15 at the time, and although the rejection happened over the phone, he was so irate that he illegally drove a car to the nearest place he knew to where my house was. I'd once told him I live near the hospital and waited there demanding I give him more accurate directions to my house. In retrospect, I probably should have been more terrified than I was. He shoved me into a wall and busted my head open. I was taking a break at work behind the building listening to music and enjoying the breeze, and coworker I constantly tried to avoid because he was a creep started asking me out. I'd already been irritated because of crappy customers and the overbearing heat inside, so instead of the usual brush off reply, I snapped at him and made it clear I was in no way interested, had a boyfriend whom I loved, and that he needed to get the duck out of my personal space. I went to walk away, and he grabbed my arm to twist me around trying to back me against the wall, and when I managed to finally rip my arm away and press him back to get him off me, he got pissed, shoved me. Back of my head hit the wall, split open about 1.5 inches, bled a lot, had to get about 7 stitches. He got fired and also arrested for assault. He tried to say I had hit him first, but luckily there was a camera around back that caught the whole thing. Edit. Okay, I did not think this would blow up like it did, and I went through the thread and thought I'd address some things. I apologize in advance for this next wall of text, but I'm on mobile. I was 19 when this happened, and he was 21. No one really liked him cause he was a chode and thought he knew better than everyone, even though he half-assed everything and constantly got in people's way. He also asked out every female worker multiple times and was really pushy about it, made us all extremely uncomfortable just to be around him because he didn't seem to understand personal space. When it came to anyone female, we were all constantly telling him to back off. We worked the same shift cause he kept getting rotated around for problems, and finally they left him where he was cause he only harassed me and I was the only one who didn't seem back bothered. I didn't complain, which I realized later I should have, cause it might have gotten him fired sooner before this all went down. Because I was the only female on shift, he'd always try to get with me. It never worked, and I found ways to keep my distance. The day he busted my head open, the heat and long day combined, and I snapped at him instead of just walking away like normal, which was something he obviously hadn't been expecting. And so he grabbed me and tried to hold me back while he yelled about me being a grouch. I ended up with a bruise, shaped like his hand, that I didn't notice till I got to the hospital. After he shoved me and I hit the wall, I started yelling at him, and he was freaking out a bit cause for once I was actively standing up for myself, and he started to realize what he'd just done. He only flipped out for real and started apologizing a mile a minute. When I reached back and my hand came back covered in blood, I went inside still yelling at him, and our manager came over to snap at me until I told him what happened and showed him my bloody hand. He turned me to check out my head and panicked. Unfortunately for the idiot still apologizing, our uniform shirt was white and the back of mine wasn't anymore. I know head wounds bleed a lot, but it looked like I'd been hurt worse than I was. I even freaked out at how much blood there was once I took off the shirt. I got taken to the hospital and the cops were called, and they arrested him later. We found out he was on probation, for punching his girlfriend in the face earlier in the year and kicking her dog around afterwards. He was in jail for a good 7 years after the fact. All I did was give a report on what had happened, and the tape proved my story. I never went to court. I was 19 and this really wasn't that big a deal to me. The injury wasn't that bad. I was in the hospital longer for questioning than anything else. I was almost completely stitched up before the police even came. All I had was a tiny hairline fracture, not even a concussion. I was more pissed off than anything. I didn't even think to sue, but I had bigger things to deal with at that point in my life than some idiot at work, and I sort of just moved on after everything. In high school I turned a guy down, so he went around spreading rumors that he tried to duck me, but my vagina was deformed and practically closed up. He spent the rest of the year talking crap about how nasty I was, unclean, unshaven, etc. Sometime about 5 years ago, he tried to add me on Facebook, and I blocked him. Duck that guy. I spent months trying to convince people I knew how to wash my butthole. I turned down a guy that was known for being the popular guy, and I thought he was a bit of a jerk. When he tried to kiss me, I turned my head the other way, said I wasn't interested and walked off. He grabbed my hand, spat in my face, and said I missed the best opportunity in my life and the only reason he tried to kiss me was because he pitied me. Guy asked me out during an Uber pool ride. I told him I wasn't interested, and he started moving closer and asking me why I wasn't interested and what was wrong with him. It was uncomfortable to say the least. My Uber driver, for some reason, thought it was hilarious to see me pressed against the door to try and get away from this random guy invading my personal space. Thankfully no one has threatened my life. Went into a gas station to get my mom some lottery tickets and the cashier asks for my ID. While holding my ID, he begins questioning my marital status among other personal details. I told him I wasn't interested and paid. He gives me my ID back. I go to the car, start it up, and begin to tell my little sister what happened as she was waiting in the car, and she starts yelling that someone is coming over. Now the cashier is tapping my window and yelling, "Are we friends?" I put the car in reverse and drove away. While I don't know for certain who did it, the next day I had my tires slashed. I was told that the way my tire looked seemed like it was most likely intentional. Unfortunately this was like 8 years ago, so I no longer have the picture of the tire. As a precaution, I had some of my male friends go by and tell him to leave me alone. I never went back to that gas station and didn't have any issues with the guy after that. The worst part was I was 18, and when I told my mom what happened regarding the guy harassing me, she didn't believe me. This thread helps explain why some women have trouble saying no.